Hey everyone, welcome back to Rugged DIY. I'm Steve Mikulich. We're going to continue the deck renovation from the last video. It's been about 2 weeks, and the majority of that time has been spent in demolishing the old deck boards and that table that was here. Now, the intent when we started this was just to have a simple renovation. We wanted to just shrink the deck down to about 20 feet long or wide. And so the idea was we were just going to take up some of these old deck boards and replace any that were broken or rotten or anything like that. But as we started going, we started finding a lot of issues. One was the screws that were used to install this deck. A lot of the heads were stripped on them, so we weren't able to just screw them out. We've been having to pop the deck boards off using a pry bar and a hammer. So that's been, kind of slow process there. The other issues with the deck boards is that there was a lot of rot. And the reason for all that rot, one, when they built this deck, they left all of their leftover building materials underneath the deck. And the reason that's bad is all of this wood absorbs moisture and holds that moisture, and it also attracts things like carpenter ants and termites. And so there's a lot of wood debris that's under here, holding all that moisture and causing a kind of saturation of the wood of this deck all year long. The other major contributing factor, this downspout is terminating right underneath the deck here. So it just spills out onto a little piece of concrete, and there's a lot of erosion away as it's making its way out from underneath the deck. But it's really saturating all of the ground that is around this downspout. A major area of decay is right where that old steps used to be. Now, the problem with this is the steps, they terminated right on top of the deck here. And so all of the debris, the dirt and everything that built up around there stayed constantly saturated with moisture from this downspout that was keeping everything underneath it wet. And so all of this wood here is completely rotten. And it also rotted away this joist that connects right into the building and is a major support structure for this upper deck. Now, none of this, the lower deck or the upper deck, has been secured in with any sort of concrete foundations or concrete supports for any of the beams. That's a problem in the area where I live because it's code required that anything that's a permanent structure has to have some sort of concrete or permanent foundation, because we live in a critical area whereby water, and this is a flood zone. So the idea is you want to make sure that any of your permanent structures can't wash away if we were to have a major flood or something. So this is essentially turning into a complete rebuild. I'm gonna have to demolish the rest of these pieces of wood. None of this is salvageable. I've got to demolish off the end here, and I've got to shrink off the other end there about 18 to 20 inches, making this just a 20-foot width. Now, before I get there, I'm gonna come through, again, demolish all of this, get rid of all of the debris and everything that they've left underneath this deck. And then I'm gonna come in after setting the posts that are required for support. I'm gonna put on some new end joists around to frame in the deck. And then I'm going to add wash gravel underneath, and I'm gonna compact that down with just a hand compactor. And what that'll do is that will displace any moisture that gets underneath the deck and help prevent buildup of moisture over time, and it'll displace all that water so that you're not having erosion problems. The other thing, all of these kind of 4x4s that they have set here, that's fine, but the fact that it's resting on the ground is a problem because they're all rotten around their base. And so I'm gonna remove all of those. I'm gonna remove any of these joists that were damaged or rotten and replace all of those, put down the wash gravel, compact it in, and then I'll re-support all of these center supports with new 4x4s to just add some additional stability. And by placing them on top of those rocks, it will help prevent rot and decay because it won't be sitting on a constantly wet surface. And so it'll add more durability and survivability to this deck. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and pick up a little bit later once I've demolished the rest of this deck and cut off that end there. And then we'll pick up when I start setting in all of the 4x4 posts and getting everything reframed. But I'm gonna go ahead and get started now, and we'll see you in just a little bit. Okay, I finished demolishing the remaining deck boards that were here, the ones that were rotten where the steps were. And now you can see that the water coming out from this downspout has completely saturated this ground. And this ground is always saturated year round because it's usually everything is covered, so it's really not evaporating. And it's this saturated on a year where we've gotten very little rain this year. And usually, we have a lot more moisture, so that would tell you that this area is usually much more wet. Now, all these boards have been gone for about a week now. These few boards that were sitting here have only been sitting for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days longer than the rest of it. And the rest of the ground is still pretty wet as well, but drier than it is right here. And you can see all of these joists are rotten. They're all black and rotten and mushy and saturated with water. So I've got about 6 of these joists that I'm gonna have to replace. Thankfully, it looks like this supporting joist on the back here, the frame that's attached to the concrete, that seems to be okay. I'm gonna have to really do a thorough inspection of it to make sure that it doesn't have any rot, but hopefully I'll be able to salvage that and not have to replace that. And I'll just have to add on to the rest of this and replace the joists in the center here that are rotten. But this is why it's so important to really think about, things like water and the effects that it's gonna have on your deck long term. Because what they should have done is run a gutter out so that the water spilled out away from the deck, keeping the area underneath the deck nice and dry. So it created a greater problem just from poor planning. But we're gonna fix that. I just wanted to catch you up real quick on the status and show you the effects of that water damage. I'm going to continue demolishing this deck, and as you can see, it's very hot. I'm sweating my butt off out here. So I'm going to get moving and get the rest of this demolished, and hopefully maybe today or tomorrow we can start digging holes for those posts. All right, it's been a few more days of work now, and as you can see, all I'm left with from the original deck is just this backboard here that's up against the house. As I was taking everything apart, I found more and more rot. So I ended up taking out about half of the joists that were here were infested with fungus and were rotten. So I ended up getting rid of those. I've ordered new wood. I've got staged out front ready to put in here. The pieces or the joists that I was able to salvage, I'm just gonna power wash those down, and I've got an antifungal spray that I'm gonna spray those down with. And I'm actually gonna spray down this area here with an antifungal as well, because the wood, when I demolitioned it all and stacked it off to the side, I had it sitting just for a couple days, and all of the spores from all the fungus dropped onto the ground and actually started forming a layer of fungus on the ground. So clearly all of the wood that was here was infested with some sort of fungus or mold or something. So I'm gonna go ahead and spray that down here in just a moment. I've also got a delivery of blue rock, 3/4 inch blue rock that I'm gonna spread underneath here. I'm gonna put about 2 inches thick on the bottom. And as I was explaining, you really want to route the water away from the building. So I got one of these drain pipes that I've got. Now these corrugated pipes actually have perforations in them, so it's gonna leach out a little bit of water all along the route, but it won't contain all the water right here anymore. So whenever we have heavy rains, though some of the water will spill out, it will get spread out through a larger area of the ground, and then the spillover will go out and down away from the house. So when I put all the joists together, I will box this area in and then just put the deck boards right up to this and just leave this open for access and everything. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna remove that board here so that I can get in with a wheelbarrow and bring in all of that rock, spread that rock down, and I'm gonna compact it, and then we'll start putting the joists in. And then once all of the joists are in, we'll go ahead and start putting the deck boards on. Depending on how long it takes to get all this moved, we may be able to get all of the joists in today so that tomorrow we can lay all of the deck boards. If not, then obviously it's gonna be, maybe another day or two before all of this is finished. Now, once I get all of the decking laid, the next thing I'm gonna do is build a table here and a bench at the back end of this deck. Once all of that's done, I'm gonna let this sit and dry. While this is drying, I've decided I'm not gonna try to salvage any of this upper deck. I'm gonna demolish the whole thing and just rebuild it all. Because looking at it, it looks like there's a lot of rot from what I've been able to expose already. Clearly you can see here there's a lot of rot, and I got underneath there and I was looking around, and it doesn't look like it's very sound. And rather than trying to salvage a turd, I'd rather just get rid of it and rebuild an entirely new deck. So I'll have a new deck down here and a new deck up here. It'll be, a nice finished look, have some appeal when I go to put this house on the market next year. So anyway, I'm gonna get started on this, and I'll kind of come back and get some shots as I make progress to show you each step. So I'll see you in just a minute. All right, we've finished adding all of the rock in now. And just to kind of explain again the whole purpose behind the rock, this is gonna do a few things. It's gonna cut down on erosion, because when the water comes through the deck, it's gonna hit this rock and kind of disperse rather than wearing away at the dirt and causing that erosion to run off. It's also gonna cut down on just general moisture underneath the deck, because you won't have all of the kind of moisture coming up from the ground and saturating the wood, because all of this rock will act as kind of a barrier and will displace water. And it just kind of adds stability to the overall deck. The other nice thing, which is kind of just a consequence of having the rock, is that the gaps underneath the deck are kind of filled with the rock, so you won't have rodents and snakes and things getting underneath your deck, because the bottom will be filled obviously with the rock. So now that I've got this all finished, the next thing I'm going to do, the joists that were here, the old joists, there's a couple of attachments that are still on them. They still have those 4x4s on the center of them, and some of them still have the hardware for attaching to this end piece here. So I'm gonna take off all of that hardware. I'm gonna take off those 4x4s, and then I'm gonna take them out to my driveway, and I'm gonna power wash them all off just to get off all of the old dirt and any sort of, fungus or anything that's on there, just to get them all nice and clean. And then when I start to put them in, what I've decided to do is stagger them. So I'm gonna do one old one, one new one, one old one, one new one, just to kind of add, I guess, some stability to the overall deck. But I'm gonna go ahead and get started on that, get those cleaned up, and then we'll hopefully start getting those installed. I think I'm running out of time today, so I'll probably just get those taken apart and start power washing those off. I don't think I'll be able to start installing them today, but as soon as I get finished with those, I'll come back and pick up the video with the joists installed. Okay, so I've got all the joists put in now, and I hung all the joists using hangers because what my research suggested was that that was the code compliant method for hanging the joists, and it was going to add the most stability and rigidity. I also added some 4x4 posts down the center, just because the joists were giving a little bit of a bowing in the center of the joist, and so that added just a little bit more stability. When I put on the deck boards, that should add more rigidity to it and kind of make things a little more stable, but just for installation purposes, I thought that might add just a little bit more stability to the deck. Now, to determine how many deck boards I needed and to plan out my design, I did a lot of research, reading all of the different patterns and things for staggering your deck layout. Now, if you have a deck that is a standard size, if it's an 8, 12, or 16 foot length, then you don't need seams. You can just run a single length of board. But because this is 20 feet, I wanted to stagger my seams so that it would add more stability to the overall design. The design that I chose is kind of a 3 pattern design that then repeats itself throughout the deck. This helped me determine what my installation was going to be up front so that I'm not trying to figure it out as I'm installing everything. And it also helped me so that I know how many boards I need to purchase for my installation. So I'm going to go ahead and get started installing all of this, cutting my boards and laying them down. And once I finish that, we'll come back and take a look at the finished deck. Now, after I finish laying down the deck boards, then I'm also going to build that bar on this end, and then at the other end I'm going to build a bench. That'll be the end of the project. Thank you so much for coming and watching, and I will see you on the next video.